Okay. Looks like I fixed it. Sorry for a bit of a delay there. Just having some issues with my. It's just like that scene was broken or something. It wasn't working. Okay, well I can get rid of this because we have started the stream. And so today I want to work on downtime moves. Because I've been playing some Blades in the Dark, and this just seems like a totally relevant thing to bring in. Is some of the ideas behind John's downtime stuff for my own downtime stuff. And having played Blades a bunch, I'm feeling more and more like it is also like I need to look at my game as being somewhere in the middle between Monster Hearts and Blades in the Dark, where I'm taking a lot of the like structural stuff from Blades, and more of my like thematic content from stuff like Monster Hearts. Now, the downtime moves are kind of a good place to start, but I'm also considering bringing in hi Alex, considering bringing in some of the like how would you put this, the like structure of how like the scenes are framed and stuff like that, because John does a similar had a similar kind of objective about like his statement was like, oh well, like any kind of planning and all that kind of stuff in story games is dumb. You can skip it. There's no reason to do a plan. Just go into the middle of the action and then flashback, etc. as needed. And so for my part, the thing I kind of want to make statements about is just like moving away from this minute to minute, moment to moment kind of game and really enforcing more of a like broad scope in terms of time, and like making the players need to all kind of do like jumps in time, like play some moments that are important, do the good stuff, and then skip ahead to the next good bit, which is a very similar objective to what John had in Blades. And the more I play Blades, the more I realize that like John beat me to it in a lot of ways in terms of coming up with a bunch of these awesome ideas and delivering them in a really good mechanical package. So basically, why do the work myself when John's already done it? So I can just steal from him as liberally as I want. So that's what I'm going to do. And we're going to start with some downtime stuff from Blades. And I'm just going to copy pasta this bit. His brief description of doing downtime stuff and what that looks like. So between scores, your crew spends time at liberty attending to some personal things. This is called downtime. During a downtime phase, each PC has time to pursue 2 downtime actions. This bit about being at war does not apply. And so we're going to look at the options that... Damn it, I keep hitting the wrong enter button. We're going to look at the options that John included and then, think about what their significance is and come up with, what is actually going to be important for my game. Sorry, working on a long-term project. You choose from this list or come up with some other downtime action of your own if none apply. You may choose the same action more than once. As always, you can only pursue actions that you are in a position to accomplish. If a downtime action is contingent on another action, resolve that action. Very basic. So his actions are to acquire an asset, to gather info, to recover, reduce heat, train, vice, and work on a long-term project. And so I think the ones that are most relevant are like the idea of a vice, which is going to be different in my game, but like something that lets you recover, right? Vice and recover are kind of, dealing with two different kinds of damage. So these ones are going to be very relevant. We're going to have equivalent stuff in my game. Damn it, I keep doing that. Train, I'm happy to get rid of. Reduce heat, nah. Long-term project, obvious. Like, this is kind of the default option. Like, and a lot of other things are really just this one in disguise. And then we have acquire asset and gather info. And so to categorize these, right, like these ones here are about recovering your kind of in-game currencies, right, of like stress and harm, because those are things that you can cash in during scores to get stuff, or that you have to, or that are taxed from you in order to get stuff. Working on a long-term project is more forward-looking, forward-facing, and is about changing your fictional positioning. Reduce heat, I don't think is super relevant. This is like a crew level equivalent of vice and recover, and one which I don't necessarily feel like I'm going to incorporate into my game. Is any kind of like crew level damage. So I'm just going to clear that one off. And then acquire an asset and gather info. Again, these are kind of like similar to the long-term project idea of, garnering yourself some improved fictional positioning. So our equivalents for these kinds of things are going to be our forward-facing stuff is going to be like, making social links, and investigating the darkness. These are going to be some things that we want to look at in my game, as like proactive things that you can do during downtime. And I will consult my notes here because I have some ideas of what I want to have happen during my like downtime player turn kind of time. Yeah, so my three that I have listed in my notes are just, essentially social links, investigating, and a kind of recovery action, which could be, which I might force into being helping someone else recover, but these are like my three things that I want to have. However, I like the idea of bringing in clocks. I think clocks can solve a bunch of problems both in downtime and some of the other stuff that I was trying to do, like my bickering move from last week, I think could benefit from a clock. And I was talking about incorporating that, not last week, but whatever, the last time I did one of these. And so, long-term projects. This seems like a good little bundle of things for people to do in downtime. Long-term projects being the kind of like catch-all for doing anything outside of this other stuff. Making social links is going to happen between PCs. So this is going to be a way that they can get more resources to use in the future. Because whereas in Blades, it's all about having, like, everyone as an individual has a stock that they can expend, and that they refill. In my game, it's more like you build up this stock that then gets used, that then you use in future. So you don't come primed with a bunch of stuff. You have to kind of build before you can expend. um, because I want to front load that because my game is structured differently, in that it includes, whereas Blades is like you do the score and then you have downtime. With mine, it's like there's a phase that is going to function. I'm thinking more and more that it's going to function similarly to a score. There's downtime, and then there's like the big, you know, there's like another score. It's downtime sandwiched between two other things. Social links are going to work more like stress in reverse, if you want to draw an analogy to Blades. So you're going to build up social links, and then you're going to spend them later to get to do some of the cool stuff that you would accumulate stress for in Blades. So it's kind of a flipping of how you get the resource, but ultimately it's a resource that's going to be used for similar stuff. And then I'm not going to necessarily have like a harm thing the way Blades does, because I don't know if that's necessarily in keeping with my genre. But we're going to have some other wacky stuff around, and like, you know, like the whole like trauma thing is going to work very differently as well. Essentially, rather than trauma being something that you accumulate, trauma, that my like trauma equivalent, right, this like dark side to your character and their power, is going to be always present out the gate, and then something that you can like fall into in a Monster Hearts Darkest Self kind of way. But playing to it is going to function similarly to how people play to trauma in Blades, I think. I think maybe some of the playbooks will have some like essentially self-harm stuff where they, because yeah, my like harm equivalent is going to be a strain, which is going to function kind of like stress in Blades. In that's the thing that gets like hit, and so some of the playbooks will want to accumulate stress in order to get benefits. Some of them won't. Some of them it will just be damage that they take. Either way, downtime is going to give them an opportunity to recover that. I'm not 100% sure if I want my recovery to be like I heal myself or I heal someone else. I kind of like the idea of externalizing it, so like someone else has to help you recover. Although that can get a little awkward. At the very least, like I spend the action to recover myself, but I have to get another character in to do it, something like that. I feel like that's important, and I feel like that's true to the genre, that like the protagonists coming together is what allows them to keep fighting. It could be that we lump social links and recovery together as an option, or maybe it's better that like certain playbooks get to piggyback one of these on the other. And then investigating the darkness is going to be our looking forward kind of thing. So in as much as we have like acquire asset or gather info, investigating the darkness is about better positioning ourselves to fight the bad thing. Which, like, this one is still really abstract in my head. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to play out. It might be that it is, that it exists, like, more in the fiction layer than in the mechanical layer. But I would like for there to be mechanics that trigger off of this. I think there might end up being some kind of engagement-y thing. Some kind of like initial establishing role, which would be influenced by how good your investigation was. So it might be that we investigate in order to be able to, like get the jump on it, stuff like that. That's something that I've been having in my head for a while. I don't remember who Kyubey is, but I was thinking of having like maybe not a playbook where you are straight up a cat, or at least like strictly a cat, but a kind of like advisorly, matronly kind of playbook is definitely something that I would love to have for the like Sailor Moon esque team. I think that's very appropriate. Just catching up on chat here. So Alex, yeah, it's like obligation phase, friendo phase, your downtime phase, and then the fighting the evil phase. Um, and what I'm thinking is um, to have that explicit like 1, 1, and 1 be the actual setup. Um, Initially, I was thinking like you could go 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, and then go to 3 when you wanted to. But now I'm thinking it's just 1, 2, 3 reset, 1, 2, 3 reset, um, because it's just like cleaner. I don't have to make up mechanics. I don't know if I can think of a good way to like trigger the big fight the evil phase. If I can come up with a good way to make that happen, then maybe I'll go back to that previous model. But I think it's totally okay to just structure it as, like very clearly and cleanly. Just have it be you go from one to the other to the next, and then loop back. See, I haven't actually watched Madoka yet, and I need to, obviously. I know it's very important. I've like done a bit of research on it, but I haven't actually watched it. So that's top of my list. But given that it is in the revisionist end of things, I think it's okay for me to stick to like primary genre bits for now, and dig into those a little later. Okay, so what we need to come up with is some structure around this. The other big thing about Blades, right? If we're modeling this after Blades, is it functions. It's still powered by the Apocalypse game, but all of its moves and stuff are framed very differently. It's kind of like there's really only one. There's like one move in Blades, and then a bunch of different ways to do it. Right? There's one task resolution thing, whereas in Apocalypse World, there's essentially these like distinct task resolution things for different tasks, and they all function differently, right? Your basic moves, when you do something under fire, that resolves a certain way, and when you want to manipulate someone, that resolves a certain way. And they're all very similar, but they are like distinct mechanical bits. Whereas in John's game, he's just saying like, there is one move, right? There's your position and effect, and then there's like, and you use different like numbers in them, depending on what kind of task you're doing, but all tasks are resolved the same way, which is an interesting choice, and I think lines up with everything that I've ever heard John say about game design and his approach to it, or his like thinking about Apocalypse World, because I think this was in our first Apocalypse World show that we did, where it was me, John, Austin, and Stephanie, and Adam. And John said that like really the only move in Apocalypse World is the Savvy Head like workshop move, where you say what you want, and the MC will say yes, and you need to do this, this, and this, or you need these things, and then you'll try to do it, right? And so in that same spirit, in Blades, the one move for task resolution is you say what you're going to do, and the GM will say, okay, cool, so that sounds like you're in a desperate position, but with great effect. And you're like, cool, yeah, I'm going to like wreck this guy or whatever. and then you roll, and then we have a very much in the spirit of Apocalypse, like soft hit, full hit, miss kind of paradigm. So yeah, like to my understanding of how John has set it all up, it really harkens back to that idea of like, yeah, there's really only one move. And so in his game, there is like explicitly one move that you resolve a bunch of different ways for different tasks. All of this to say, if I start going into that realm, then it changes. I have to change a lot of the underpinning of like how these moves are going to work. Less so for downtime, but if we start bringing that into the like main phase stuff, it really changes things because we have to look at, you know, structuring things in that way. If we're hacking blades, we're going to have, I feel like that core basic move of blades needs to be in your game if you're hacking blades. Otherwise it'll just feel weird, right? To have now these downtime moves, which are going to have to be underpinned on the same structure of having like, you know, stats and groups of stats and all that kind of stuff. So if we're doing these in the spirit of blades, we need to look at making moves that make sense within that. So with downtime, it's less consequential. There isn't the whole, like they're essentially all fortunes rolls, which are like the most basic, where we don't even say, you know, is this risky? Is this desperate? Whatever. It's just like, cool, this is just a thing that is happening kind of generically, and nothing can go really wrong. It's just, you know, how much do you get out of it? It's all success for fortune. Yeah, exactly. Saberwolf. It would just end up being like a totally different thing. Um, so yeah, like all of this thinking that I've been having has been essentially that I need to like re-architect my game to have a kind of like bladesy underpinning, in terms of its dice and its core mechanic, right? It's like using John's one basic move to run my game off of, and then pulling a bunch of the more peripheral stuff from Monster Hearts and appending that to that, you know, core underpinning. So I feel like the downtime moves are a great place to start because, like I was just saying, they don't have all of the like failure case shit that I need to worry about, which is like a thing that you write once for all of your stuff. And I don't need to worry too much about all of that. I can just say, here are the things you're going to do. Here are some like kind of values. Here is what those moves are for. Describe this kind of thing. You're going to get this stuff. You roll some dice. Boom. There you go. And so the other reason I think this is all going to work really well is that from the get-go, I really wanted to have my conversation be framed in a similar way to Blades, where it's like the MC throws some bullshit at your character, and then because it's about your like internal, you know, processing of it, the player gets to decide how they like endure this trauma and all that kind of stuff. So that also aligns with the framing of the Blades core move, because it's like, here's the thing, okay, you want to do that, you decide what thing you're rolling, and then I, as the MC, would give you your position and your effect, and then you roll. There's gonna be a little bit of weirdness around position and effect, for my game, because it's gonna be a little less direct. We're gonna have to figure out all that stuff, but that's gonna be a problem for another day. Today, I just want to get these like basic downtime moves figured out, because they're all kind of on the like fortune roll end of the spectrum, where I can ignore a bunch of the other mechanics, and just get a feel for writing this kind of thing, before I dive into the really nasty stuff. So doop. I'm just gonna copy this text box, make another one over here, and we're gonna start writing some basic downtime moves. in this style. And then I think the next time I do one of these, I'm going to go in and like reorganize all the stats, figure out what my basic move a la Blades is going to be, and how I want to interpret stuff like position and effect for my game. And it may be that, anyways, I have a bunch of ideas about that, but I'm going to make them more precise because, yeah, I can do some fun twisting and turning within that. So we have investigate the darkness. We have making social links. You know, not final names for any of these. Working titles. Recovery and long-term projects. So investigating the darkness is our forward-facing move where we're going to be like accumulating some kind of resource going forward. So we're going to need to like describe what information you're after and how you're going to get it. This will determine the skill being rolled. Right, so is this that you're reading ancient books? Are you going around asking people stuff? Like how are you gathering this? It's kind of our like gather info move, right? Or is it that you're recruiting an ally? I feel like I'm just going to lump acquire an asset and gather info style stuff into one thing where you're getting some kind of, maybe this is like finding an ancient sword to help you fight the thing, whatever, right? Like all of this stuff can apply. And that the important distinction between this and a long-term project is that the payoff for this is like, when we go to fight the thing, which is the immediate next phase of the game, this is already going to have paid dividends. Whereas the long-term project, it might not be for a couple, episodes. It might take a few episodes to figure it out. And I probably want to stretch the time span of those out and make them feel quite long-term. But we'll get to that later. So very simply, we're going to describe, what information or resource you're after and how you're going to get it. We determine what skill is being rolled. Blades, dice happen. 1 to 3. And so this is about, we can imagine like, we can frame this similarly or like scale this in terms of its numbers similarly to the recovery stuff from Blades, where we would say like 1 tick on the investigation track, 4 or 5, 2 ticks, 6, 3 ticks. Spend investigation. And I think what this is going to be then is also like when you confront the dark power, state of your investigation will set your engagement roll, which we're going to rename and repurpose. Roll level. And ticks can be spent during the battle. See, the ideal will be because you have like, you've discovered their weakness or whatever that can like cost you a certain amount of ticks, and then boom, you get a thing. Yeah, what happens if we crit on the investigation, right? What do we get in that case? Because that's part of the game too. Crit. Is it just you get 4 ticks? Some other payout? I feel like it would be fun to get like some cool fiction out of getting a crit. Some insight or deeper knowledge. A glimpse into the heart of the darkness. You know, something evocative like that. Because, you know, just you get 4 ticks. It doesn't feel... that's not much. You know, it's not very compelling. And so... that one... this move is mostly referencing another mechanic that isn't quite fleshed out yet. And it's going to do a very simple thing for it. Right, I'm just like putting ticks on this investigation track. And then this isn't really part of the move, but this is just for my own reference. All right. The one that's actually going to be more of a self-contained thing is this making social links move. So choose one other player character. And detail an activity, or like detail what you do together. So this could be, you know, going to the arcade or whatever shared hobby or whatever that they want to do. And I think maybe as a note to myself, we probably want to establish like shared interests and stuff like that during character creation. I'm gonna write that down, because ideally we wouldn't need to be struggling to think of these kinds of things. We would like already have some shared interests in mind. Where's my bit on character creation? Here we go. So I'm just making a note, shared interests in character creation. I'd like to get the players thinking about this kind of stuff in advance of them needing to roll it. In the same way that in Blades you choose your vice, right? I would love to have like... and that they be shared, I think, is nice. But or it could just be like hobbies, pastimes, escapes from the mundane of the characters. This is all going in my notebook for later. Something to think about when I revisit character creation. And yeah, like, you know, in Apocalypse World, when you get your... because we can look at crits as being the, like, opened move kind of equivalent, right? And all of this stuff about, you know, the Psychic Maelstrom in Apocalypse World is just really open-ended and evocative. And that's, in my experience, has been more than enough to give me fun stuff in my game. I can't make statements about what exactly that's going to be because it's going to be so different for everyone's game. So I think just having it be like an opportunity for everyone to spout some interesting fiction on a crit for investigating is pretty legit, and we'll have some fun context for it because it'll be like, oh, well, I'm trying to find this like ancient sword, and then we can say, oh, well, you know, what does this ancient sword reveal about the nature of the darkness that you're fighting? And we can talk about that a bit. Also, in our crew playbook, our team playbook. Oh, I have to stop editing before I can open a new thing. In our team playbook, we have already talked about the nature of the darkness. So we have these prompts too to help the MC be able to fill in that information later. And we've already all agreed that this is the most interesting thing, right? To like sterilize and preserve is the most interesting thing. So then, oh yeah, how does this ancient sword relate to overcoming this theme of like sterilizing and preserving things? Boom. Pick a way that they get bonus die if they pick an activity that is the hobby your PC likes with Social Link. Like if they like fine dining and I take them out to a great lunch, perhaps that could be compelling. Yeah, something like that, right? Where the characters have overlapping areas of interest so that we push them to do stuff together. Like in Blades, you get that by because like you get an extra die, and I think that those mechanical incentives are really important because those are ways that you make the mechanics shape the kinds of fiction that you get. And if the kinds of fiction that we want to get are about these kids banding together and hanging out and like being friends, then obviously I need to give them extra dice every time they do stuff together, which also means I get to make it harder for them to do stuff alone. On the flip side, right? So, because we're going to scale everything to expect them to be doing stuff together in terms of our dice. So, let's write that into our move, because that's totally important, what you do together. Social links you're always going to do with another player, and so then it would have to go one step further. It's not just having them be there, because that's like the default thing. But yeah, having some shared interest or, how do we want to gatekeep that, right? Because here's the thing. If we just say, oh, well, you guys get a bonus die if you do something that both of you like, then everyone at the table is just like, cool, we all like fine dining, and anytime we social link, we just go out to lunch together. Which isn't very thought-provoking. It's like achieving my goal of being like, oh yeah, well, they should always be doing stuff together. But it's like there are really boring ways for that to manifest. Players can always do stupid, boring things, no matter how fancy your mechanics are. But I would like for this to be needing that, just a little extra, a little something extra. For now, with option for bonus die if it is a shared interest or of particular relevance to the characters. I always think of things and forget them while I'm typing. Particularly thoughtful, etc. Like, it's one thing if we're just like, oh yeah, we go to the movies. But if it's like, oh, we had this scene earlier where like we were talking and so-and-so said that this was their favorite movie, and so I surprised them with tickets to their favorite movie, right? It's going to be better than just like we hang out and play video games. Even if we really love hanging out and playing video games, there hasn't been that extra layer of thought to it, which is what I would love to have. And yeah, that you don't, as Salmello says in chat, which I think is great, right? The idea that like you don't know you have shared interests with everyone necessarily, right? Like there's always going to be room for people to discover that and play, or at least we want there to be room for people to discover that and play, because then there's more space for us to engage with. So we want to give the players a way of establishing these shared interests without necessarily having them start with any. Which is like maybe something that we make social links to do. Maybe that's like a side effect of it. Um, how do we want to write this down? Because this is something I need to think about. I'm not going to be able to just like off the cuff think of the perfect way to encapsulate this, or at least I haven't yet. So, a way for PCs to discover shared interests. And like making mechanics around being friends with people is really weird, right? Because it's all about, because like you look at someone and you're like, okay, I'm friends with Adam. Why am I friends with Adam? Because we happened to meet and like we met by way of our mutual interests. Like you always kind of have something in common with someone to be a friend with them in the first place. You might discover more things in common, but there should always be something. Shared interests or new shared interests. Everyone is going to be friends by default, even if it's like a tense friendship or a friendship that is, fraught with complication. Everyone's still friends, so it's not like you make friends with this person. And social links are about a deepening of relationships. Maybe what is most important is reincorporation, the players remembering details about each other's characters, because part of what we want to do here is, in as much as we're like making fiction about these people being friends, it's kind of interesting to think like, well, how do you actually be a good friend? And I've seen, every now and then on like social media and stuff, I see people talking about like the difficulty of making friends or of retaining friends or getting along with their friends. And I think it would be kind of neat to like put some of that skill set in the game. Because that's really relevant to the characters and their situation. And it's like very difficult to mechanize this kind of stuff because it's so, like there are all kinds of people that play RPGs, but yet Adam is my friend and other people that I have played RPGs with aren't necessarily. So a shared interest isn't all that it takes. It's like this. Friendship is such a weird thing, or like a unique thing. It's very difficult to encapsulate into a mechanic because it's so, it's like a matter of taste, and taste is incredibly elusive in terms of its definitions. Like I would have a lot of trouble saying exactly what I like. Or I may be like, I like this kind of person. But then I'll meet someone who surprises me in that they are that kind of person, but I had never seen them that way. Right? Or like, after the fact, I justify it as like, oh, well, they fit this thing. But like, I never would have thought that they would be someone I would be friends with. Like, we get surprised so often with this kind of stuff. And so it's very difficult for me to like be prescriptive about it and just be like, well, you're friends because this. Right? Like, I can't summarize that. And what I would really love is to have the social link thing be about, reflecting that kind of stuff. And so, like, getting the players to feel their way through that. It's very tricky. I like this idea. I feel like this bit here is good. The idea of reincorporation, the players remembering details about each other's characters, I think, is a good thing to require, because this requires that they actually engage, right? Making the players need to pay attention to each other's characters on like a personal level and remember details about them and like be good friends to those characters. I don't know if clocks necessarily, because then like how do we determine how big the clock is? How do we determine how much we fill in? Because this is very like, I feel like what we want to do is set up a move in which one player tries to do something nice for the other character. The other player gets to decide how successful / effective that thing is. So maybe this, what could be fun, if we're getting into the whole like Blades mindset, right, where we can talk about, you know, your effect and your position. If we put that onto a less like life and death, you know, sword fighty kind of landscape, and just say, okay, well, you want to do something nice for this person, right? You want to build your friendship with them. How are you going to do that? And so I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to like write them a poem, because they mentioned earlier that they like poetry, and then yeah, so and so is like, oh yeah, well, I do like poetry, so that would be like, that could be, you know, that could have like that could have great effect. But your character's really shit at poetry, so you know your position is desperate or whatever. And then you're like, cool, roll Grace to write a poem for your friend, and then you like, and detail like, so you like go and hang out and you read it to them, and that's your whole thing. And then boom, we roll some dice, we get a result, and we see how it goes. And you know, conversely, it could be like, you can do something that you're really good at, but that the other character isn't necessarily going to like as much, right? And your effect will be lower. Because if you're great at writing poems, but I don't like poems, then it might still be nice and thoughtful that you like write me a poem, but it's not going to move me in the way that it would a lover of poetry. And I like the idea of, you know, taking stuff out of the MC's hands. And I really want to, yeah, setting position / effect. Right, because obviously we want to be friends and everything, so I don't trust the players to arbitrate whether or not this thing is successful. But what's great is that we don't have to. We can get them to arbitrate how likely is this to be successful, and like, you know, we can be honest about our characters at this remove and be like, yeah, would they actually like that? You know, what kind of effect is this going to have? And then we can let the dice decide, because at some point it's down to taste. There's a certain intangible element which feels weird to make people arbitrarily decide, yes, my character likes your character, we are friends because you did this thing, you know, how moving is that thing, whatever. I feel like it's reasonable to put that inside of a role. See, I haven't played Masks. I need to play Masks. Clearly. People keep mentioning it. I haven't played it. It's difficult for me to find time to play new games because so much of my role-playing is on shows and stuff, and it's like scheduled week to week. Like I have a semi-infrequent Monster Hearts game that I'm emceeing for some like AFK friends of mine, and that's it. That's my only non-streamed role-playing stuff that I have going on right now, and they're all super new, and they're not going to be interested in doing anything other than this Monster Hearts game, at least for a while. So blah, difficult for me to do all of the reading that I need to be doing, basically. I mean, yes, there is room for them to always say controlled great regardless, but yeah, exactly as you say, right? You just have to trust that the players are going to play the game in good faith. And like, how boring is it for them to just be like controlled great all the time? It's dumb. I don't think I don't think most people would do that. Um, and if the rest of the game delivers, then they're definitely not going to do it. But these are some good ideas. I really like this. And like, I'm not going to necessarily write out moves specifically today because really we're in this preliminary phase of trying to like envision what this is going to kind of be like. And I have to work pretty slow because I've never designed games before. So like, I don't have that quick and easy sense of just like, oh yeah, so I like throw some dice on this, boom, boom, boom. I don't have those like ready-made structures in my mind. So I really need to go slow and like feel my way through it. Okay, recovery. So what is going to be interesting about recovery? I'm just going to save this. Let me get some water and think about it. So, some thoughts I've had around recovery. I like the idea of the characters needing to help each other. And for really like a lot of these downtime moves to be social. Like, you know, you can always get other characters to help you to get you an extra die, I think is a reasonable assumption to run under. And that's going to kind of push people towards doing stuff together. But then to take it further, I would love to have moves be about like I'm on the fence about whether or not I want to go fully into it, but here's the thought. I can never heal my own stress boxes. I always have to heal someone else's, and someone else has to heal mine. And the reason I think that's important is twofold. One, it highlights the importance of like caretaking and emotional labor, which so often get glossed over. And then it also highlights the importance, or rather the cost of that labor, right? If your character isn't able to do it, or like if only one person is doing all of this, you know, caregiving for everyone else, then they run out of like they just don't have enough energy to do it all, right? Like sorry, my voice keeps breaking. And so if only one character is equipped to help other people recover, or only one player is bothering to do so, then not everyone's going to get to recover. The downside to this framework is that there's kind of going to be this like awkward, you know, conversation of like, okay, well, I need to recover and they need to recover, so you heal them, you heal them, you heal them, whatever. But even then, I'm still okay with that because this forces the characters to take care of each other. So even if at the player level there's a little bit of like gaming the system, I think ultimately we can still get nice fiction out of it. So that's where I'm writing from at the moment. So like, you cannot heal your own strain. You can only choose to heal someone else. Yeah, and maybe like a certain amount recovers on its own, but if you need like serious attention, then someone else has to come in. I like that. Some strain might go away on its own. But for greater levels, you need help. someone else needs to spend a downtime action to fix you up. No trading. / giving away of actions. Some of how we can offset this is by having some playbook moves where you're able to like recover strain when you do other actions. But the one that's just about like just deal with the strain, like the most direct fixing one, you can't do on yourself. And I'm feeling pretty good about that, actually. I'm glad I'm not like. It's nice to have y'all in chat as a sounding board, because I can say something where I'm feeling a little like, and then y'all are just like, yeah, that's great, or oh, that's terrible, and we can, that immediate feedback sounding board effect is very helpful. I don't have anyone shouting at me about this idea yet, so I feel like, maybe it's not so bad. Cool. Some playbook moves might help folks recover strain while doing other stuff. Roll some dice. How would we want this one to play out? So with our numerical scale and our investigation thing, it's much slower. I feel like with this recovery move, because it is costing someone else an action, like I would like for it to be fairly strong. And we're in a similar number range to Blades in terms of like I envision people being able to take 9 or 10 strain. Once you take your, I kind of want to do like a, Darkest Dungeon style. Like once you're at full strain, you can keep getting hit, and you like roll dice to see if it actually knocks you out. So you might like stay at the brink for a while, but 9 is as much as you will take, and then you can like fall into darkness, and you're still playing at that point, but you're just playing with a different agenda. So in Blades with Vice, you can get up to 6, which is pretty big. So yeah, maybe this works similarly. You roll some dice. Recover based on highest die roll. I feel like that numbers game is pretty well tuned that John made, so why mess with it? Yeah, like 1 to 4 based on recovery or based on the rolled level. Maybe more. I like the 1 to 6 range based on the roll. And we might color that based on an idea of like effect. There might be some more mechanical detailing in there, like Vice and Blades. This is definitely one option to just say you just roll the dice. What sets the number? What thing are we rolling? Roll some dice. So we have some options, right? It could be the healing player, like the active player rolls skill. The player being healed rolls something, right? Where do we want that to live? I feel like it's got to be the active player, because this move, we're already giving up so much in terms of like, that I'm spending an action and I don't really get to like do a thing, and it's like, it runs the risk of being really unappealing if it's like, cool, I spend an action, I don't even roll anything, someone else rolls to try to recover. So I feel like it has to be the active player rolls a skill or a trait or whatever. Um, do we want to? Because we're playing with the form a little bit. In John's game, you never would set your position, etc. But I feel like some of that might be relevant. Hmm. It's kind of mean, but we could make it like if the amount of strain that they have is higher, it makes it harder to heal them. Although then that results in people getting like buried in there, so I don't think that's necessarily a way we want to go. Um, because what's interesting in Blades about Vice, and what I'm trying to capture here, is that, well, let me just bring up my little PDF that I have and double check how Vice works. Indulging your vice. When you indulge your vice, clear your stress from your character's tracks. Say how your character indulges their vice, including their purveyor, blah, blah, blah. Great. Um, a vice roll is like a resistance roll in reverse, right? This is actually a really interesting framing of it. Rather than gaining stress levels, you clear stress levels. The effectiveness of your indulgence depends on your character's worst attribute rating. The idea being your vice is an expression of your character's weakness. It's their weakest quality that is most enthralled to the obsession of vice. Make an attribute roll using the character's lowest attribute rating. If there's a tie, that's fine. Simply use that rating. Clear an amount of stress equal to the highest die result. That idea of it, like, reflecting something about the character in terms of the choice we're making of what to roll is really elegant and nice, and that, says something about the world of the game and about the characters. And so, when you are helping someone recover, I feel like the active player rolls, but they're in some way limited by the other player. And I'm wondering what that looks like, because certainly, like, you can help someone recover when they've, like, succumbed to the darkness, when they're in their super bad place. But then, like, I feel like that would exaggerate this, resistance that they're giving you, or the difficulty of it. But we gotta roll against something by the other player. Some rating from the player being healed reduces / offsets. That's the work of the healer. Healer. I feel like having something like that could be compelling. Zeke Mystique, this is a like magical girl anime hack of, like, it lives somewhere between Blades in the Dark and Monster Hearts. It's kind of floating in that space, and I'm waffling on how much of each it's involving, but right now we're leaning more towards Blades as our mechanical underpinning. Yeah, this is one I need to think about. This is like, something that will occur to me late at night. I tend to, like, come up with ideas right as I'm falling asleep or right after I wake up. And they tend to be things that answer these kinds of questions. So I'm gonna stew on this one. But if anyone has any good thoughts, I would love to hear them. This idea that, okay, so, like, I have to heal you, you can't heal yourself, I think is a great framing. I think that's really supporting everything else that's going on in our game. when we go to roll dice, um, I feel like just like in how in with Vice in Blades, you essentially it's like a place where we see the characters be vulnerable, and I want that to happen in my game as well. A different kind of vulnerability, like in Blades, it's a very like it's this like gritty criminal sort of vulnerability where it's like an explicit vulnerability to harm or to consequence. I would really like to push more of the emotional vulnerability, which is like that's what you see in the harm and recovery moves um, in Apocalypse World, because there's the whole thing of like when you heal people, you increase your hex with them because you get to like learn and understand. You learn things about them, you understand them better because you've seen them in this state and you've helped rebuild them. And similarly, when people hurt you, you understand them. Like in as much as they are inflicting violence on you, they're exposing themselves on this like emotional level. And that kind of interplay is really interesting. And I would love for some of that to live in this move. What that looks like is kind of an open question. I think crit on recovery gives a free social link. Some other good incentive to encourage people to use this move. I think that's a good one. But we kind of want to like, in as much as the way the Vice move works is like, it's a reflection of the character's weakness, and then if they overdo it, there's a bad thing. We kind of want to reward overdoing it in a way. But no, okay, so rewarding overdoing it is bad. And here is why. Because then there's motivation to do it even when they're not hurt, which doesn't make any fucking sense. And it's part of keeping the players on a knife edge, which is something that Blades does that I don't want to lose, is that tension is significant. So crit on recovery gives a free social link, some sort of consequence around overhealing is still important. And what that might look like in our game, right, is there's like a tension between like, yes, we all need to like care about each other and blah, 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 like be good friends. But also like we're trying to do a thing. And if I like perceive you as being whiny or like, a drama queen or whatever, being a big baby, then that can negatively impact our friendship, right? That can create problems between people. Conflict can come out of that. So, what would be some interesting consequences for us to have? Oh shit, Zeke Mystique and Zeke Bull. Oh my gosh. Both pink. It's a problem. Roll using the pool of the healing character. I was thinking something like that, or having like you're rolling against, like they have like they're both players roll and one player is subtracting from the other player. Or both players roll and like only pairs work. Something like that could be fun. Both players roll, only pairs apply? Question mark. I feel like that could be a fun mechanic. You kind of have to like get on the same page together to make stuff work. And Salmello brings up a good point around balance. So one thought on the combination of auto-healing small levels and consequences for overhealing is that it's important to make sure the threshold where one stops is lower than the point where the other is no longer a concern. Like another way to describe this would be, we don't want to be like pushing that level of risk to be too overly present. So like we want people to be able to get to being hurt bad enough that they need this move to come in, and not constantly be like floating in a space where it's not really useful and it's going to do more harm than good. Overhealing causes strain for the roller. Not 1-to-1, but maybe gives 1 or 2. So like if you have 3 harm and I overheal you by rolling a 6, we could run it like I take 3 strain, but I think that's too much, too punishing. Maybe not. Because maybe then it's like, when we actually want to heal you is when you're at like 4 or 5 or 6 or more. And that just like in Blades, there is a cost around trying to do it when you're at 4 or less, really. You start taking a serious risk. So, yeah, Zeke Mystique, I'm thinking of... Originally, I was working on a, like, Apocalypse World Monster Hearts roll 2d6 kind of setup. But I'm thinking of moving to a Blades-esque, like, dice framework. And also, like, move framework. And I was talking... So if you check out the VOD for this, which I'll be posting later, I talk about, like, the logic behind that and the structure that is required to make that switch. I talk about it in very broad strokes, but I don't know. I feel like I had some insight. I just don't want to say it twice. Okay. I actually like... The more I think about it, overhealing causes strain for the roller 1-to-1. I think this is good. Right? Because we were talking earlier, right? Like the consequence here isn't that I like get too drunk and do something stupid. It's that my friend has to do all this unnecessary work, right? And that it like strains our relationship or, hurts them in some way. So, I want to encourage people to make this move, and I think there's lots of good reasons to do it. I want to also encourage them to use it moderately and to keep them somewhat on a knife edge, not being able to be too safe about what they do. And I think stuff like this, or like John's thing in Blades, right, serves a similar purpose. We want these to reflect things about the characters. So if we do this one, then I don't feel as inclined to use some of these other ideas I had for like how the mechanic might play out. Got some weird font sizing stuff going on. Of like, maybe you roll against each other or whatever. We might still do that, but I think just having I go to heal you, the dark side of it is that if I put in all this extra work that is unnecessary, I suffer because I'm doing all this, emotional labor of caretaking, and it backlashes onto me. Keeping the consequence internal, like to the person making the decision to make the move, I think is pretty important, and I feel like that's a good way to do it. We were talking about trying to include something like how in Blades, you roll your lowest attribute because it's a reflection of your weakness. Something to kind of pull that in. I feel like this kind of does that, of talking about like, the person helping the other recover is like doing all this work, and they, run the risk of overdoing it, exhausting themselves, running out of emotional energy, all that kind of stuff. And yeah, exactly, Zeke Mystique. We want to keep these. We want to have. I mean, ideal world. Every scene in the game is the most important, moment that it could be. The whole idea of like skipping to the action. And so, yeah, we don't have a thing. We don't want to have a thing where you put a Band-Aid over someone's knee, right? We want to have the thing where you're like setting their broken leg amidst the gunfight, etc., right? And so similarly in our game, we want it to be high emotional stakes. So we want it to be like you are, close to your breaking point, and I am exhausted, and I go and I heal you, and we have this like bonding moment. Or, if it's like overly safe, then we force it to still be interesting by saying like, oh, well, that spills over onto me because you were only at 3 strain and I went to heal you, and then now I'm like stressed out and suffering about it. It like affects our relationship in this darker way, or at least me in this darker way. I think that's totally interesting. I have thought of one other way to frame this, which is that we could just say, if you don't fully heal the person, then blah, and make it more about that and have a different kind of consequence. But there will be situations where that consequence is inevitable, and I don't think that's great. So, anyways, the long-term project thing I need to come back to because it's underpinned so much in mechanics. But I don't see this changing at all from Blades' long-term project thing. The kinds of projects we work on will be different, but that's all fiction. The mechanics, I think, can just straight up be the same. This is one that we might cut as well, because it might not be relevant. It might be that our game, being a little bit more narrow in scope, doesn't require this kind of like can opener kind of move of like opening up the world and building more fictional possibility. I want to be pretty tightly controlled with the fiction in this game, or at least that's my current design goal. So it might be that the long-term project thing we just cut. It might not actually be important. If people can think of like good long-term project examples for my game, or if I can think of some, then I'll be compelled to put it in. But at the moment, it feels a little bit like not in keeping with the genre, because like, but there might be something there. It just might be very different in the kinds of things that we're pursuing. I gotta think on that one as well. And I've been going for like an hour and a half, so I think I'm gonna make this a short one. Because apparently I'm losing my voice, which is just embarrassing. But this is good. We've kind of like talked about structure and all this stuff, and I can take another look at these things down the line. The next one of these shows that I do, I'm going to be talking about, or we're going to redo all the basic moves, and restructure all the stats and everything. So it's going to be, it's going to be tearing everything up and throwing out a lot of work and all that kind of stuff. Which was inevitable. I'm not even frustrated about it. It's just funny. And I feel like, I learned some things doing these other moves. So, that all being said, if you want to see that next thing, keep an eye on my Twitter. Scheduling has been a little bit weird lately because my work schedule is changing, and there have been some, difficult, trying things in my personal life that I've been dealing with, that have been getting in the way. So I missed out on streaming last week, I think. So anyways, keep an eye on my Twitter. It's the best way to know when I'm doing this stuff. And unfortunately, my schedule is just really up in the air these days. So you can follow me, Acmean Crow, on Twitter. You can follow me here on Twitch. Twitch.tv/actualfactual. And then all of these are going up on YouTube. They're all in a playlist for like RPG design. And then I have all my playtests, which currently there's only the one. All the playtests are going to go in their own playlist as well. And you can support me doing this and other things on Patreon, which you can find all of the links to all those things on my Twitter profile. So thanks for tuning in, and thanks for being a sounding board and providing awesome feedback and suggestions in the chat. I really appreciate it. And I'll see you guys next time.